Is officially was recessed. We will call our meeting back to order at this time, so some of the other preliminaries we will not have. We're absent Commissioner Puryear this morning in our session, and he sent an email which I will read to you, which states, "I sincerely regret that I am unable to attend today's budget work session due to that I will be out of town for a mandatory meeting for work. I have expressed my concerns to the county manager and other commissioners, which I have been assured that it will be discussed in the work session." And that's a comment from Commissioner Puryear. So we will move right along then, I guess. We'll resume with discussion about positions. Yeah, you switched on me, so everybody,
I did.
please consume your chocolate so you'll be revived and ready to go. So Manager Kathy, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. The first item on our agenda is to discuss new position requests. As you know, we received 28 requests from departments for new positions. 14 were included in the recommended budget. You do have a listing of the 14 that are recommended as well as the 14 that were not included. I have heard some feedback from commissioners that there's a desire to consider 2 positions that were not initially included. And later on the agenda, we will also talk about Medicaid expansion, and that may also result in the addition of positions, along with some additional revenues that we would expect to receive. So the 2 positions that have come to my attention that you may want to add in to the recommended budget are the position requested by the Animal Services Department for an Animal Services Program Coordinator. And you'll see on the not recommended chart, the total cost of that position is around $60,000. And I have included a copy of their request. And then the second position is the addition of a grant writer position. And this was not initially requested, but that conversation has happened since that time on the benefits of adding a grant writer to our staff. And I have included just a draft job description of what that would look like. It would likely be in addition to the finance department. And that would also be approximately $60,000 with benefits, with the estimated starting salary. So that's a summary. I'll be glad to answer any questions that I can, and then turn it over to the commissioners who asked about those positions who may have something else to add.
Commissioners, anybody?
What does the Animal Services Program Coordinator, what is the job description? I read it, but I don't understand it.
Okay, so this would be an addition to the animal shelter staff. As you know, 2 animal control officers will be moving over to the sheriff's office. So this would be another full-time position at the animal shelter, and it would support shelter programming to include organizing activities that promote the shelter services and reach out to the public education, training volunteers, recruiting volunteers for the animal shelter, coordinating other activities with partner organizations such as PetSense, who we have hold cats for us for adoption. So just enhancing the outreach of the shelter, also being an additional set of hands for cleaning and just managing day-to-day operations at the shelter. And Brian, do you have anything else to add? Kelly was not able to be with us this morning due to an out-of-town meeting.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
I have a question with in relationship to this position, the Animal Services Advisory Board. Are we still going to continue with that advisory board that they've been having? What's the status of that?
Do you have any new information on that?
I do not. I don't believe that these positions would affect or that would presence of that board, I think they would still be.
Yeah,
But
I guess
we-
my question in asking that is that, you know, I know what we, with the Animal Services Program Coordinator and what we've talked about, the job description, but also, if we continue that, I know that's a group of people that also will help support the animal services and will be involved in a lot of things that we have our Animal Services Program Coordinator position there as well. I just think that that would be, hopefully they will do that, because that is a good support for the animal services, is to have that advisory board. So that was my question.
And that is a good question. The focus of that board may change some as operations shift with animal control, but that has not been completely determined yet. But I do not foresee that board itself going away. There will still be a reason to have that board in place to support the department and also, advise and be a sounding board when there are complaints and that type of thing.
Well, I know in the past, when we've had there's been some legal issues or what have you, that board was part of that process. So I just was wondering.
And it is part of our ordinance, so there would have to be an ordinance change in order to make any changes to that board.
Yeah.
Another point there too with that position in your question, the shifting of personnel within that department, the change there very obviously leaves on a hole that we need to backfill somewhere or other. I think it left that department short with services provided by animal control, and I think it's important that we feel that. So people think a lot of their animals. It's a major concern of most people in the county. You expressed one at the last meeting, but that's within the city, so a little different. But I think it's important we fill that position, and it should not have any bearing whatsoever on Commissioner Sims' question about their board, and that board has been very proactive and functional, so we want to keep them engaged there. But it's my opinion on that position anyway.
I do have another comment,
Yes, sir.
or should I
Yes,
say
sir.
question? Why were the two patrol officers transferred to the sheriff's department?
So there are several reasons for shifting the animal control officers over to the sheriff's office. One being that they do carry guns, and they carry guns under the sheriff's authorization. So for liability purposes, they do not receive the same level of training as our law enforcement officers do. So part of that, having the responsibility of carrying the guns, we felt that was a more appropriately suited function to the sheriff's office. This will provide them with training. They will become BLET certified. They will be able to then act as additional resources within the sheriff's office. They'll be able to back up our current sheriff's deputies. They'll expand their presence out in the community, and they will have the authority that our current sheriff's deputies have. So we felt like also just the nature of this enforcement arm of animal services was more well suited to the sheriff's office, and then maintaining the focus within the animal shelter of the atmosphere of adopting out our pets, and it's a little less complaint driven, and having the sheriff's office handle that side of the operations seemed to make sense. So this was originally suggested by our animal services director, Kelly Oakley, and she had conversations with the sheriff, and then we all have worked through this over the course of several months to arrive at this particular plan for that function.
That's good. Good to hear.
Okay, any other questions about that particular position? The grant writer position is also something new.
Yeah, and I will just say that was one of the positions that I would like, I actually came to you, Catherine, and asked about that. I think there's a lot of money out there, grants, that we are not getting because I think people get in their positions get tied down. They got other responsibilities, and they just basically don't have the time for that. And I think that this would be a position that would actually help this county and volunteer fire departments as well, all that, everything that falls under the county, in obtaining grants that are out there. And again, it would help with our the request of money from these departments, say revenue coming in, if you will, but it certainly will help us when we're sitting here doing the budget and we have grants that will cover some of the expenses we're looking at. And it can't be a job that just, okay, I'm a grant writer. I mean, it's got to be someone who knows what they're doing, someone who can get out there and hunt these grants down and has the capability of presenting a grant that will be accepted by whoever's taking those grants and offering those grants.
Right.
But that was my suggestion to you earlier. I didn't get in here earlier enough, but to be on the list, but that's the reason why I brought that up.
Yes, and in doing some research into those types of positions that are housed in counties and municipalities in North Carolina and throughout the country, we found that they are often located either within the finance department or within the manager's office. We felt like if this position were added, it would make sense for it to be housed within the finance department, develop the expertise in the financial system and all of those policies and procedures, and that this position would be responsible for going out and finding grants and then coordinating with departments who would be benefiting from those particular grants in their programming and working through the process with them, and then staying through the whole grant cycle all the way to the end with the final reporting and the accounting. We also see a need to have a point person just for contracts throughout the county to make sure that our contracts are routed through the appropriate steps and then that they are all collected and housed together. And we see that as potentially fitting with this position as well, to be one of the other responsibilities that would go along with a grant writer within the finance department.
This is a position that's been talked about and tossed around, I would say probably going back 10, 12 years. So it's not a new discussion. I think it's morphed into what Commissioner Sims is talking about here with greater importance on. And, excuse me, I think currently what we do there through department heads, those departments do request grants and they do a good job within the time allocations they have with the other responsibilities that they have as well. But I think that position would pay for itself in short order as we go forward. When you think about having that position, how would that relate? And I'll just pick on Mr. Hill because he's on the front row here. He applies for grants on a regular, steady basis, and good. So would that responsibility go totally to a grant writer, or how do you coordinate the new position and department heads who normally research and apply for grants?
So, and I also want to mention Tabitha is here from the animal shelter.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sorry, I did not
I
see
didn't-
her
okay. I
earlier,
didn't
so.
see her.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, no, that's okay. I didn't necessarily scan the audience, so if there's anything you'd like to add or any other questions y'all have for her, she is here now. John, how would a grant writer add or assist with your staff and operations in your department?
It would be a great help to us, absolutely. We would, it's sort of like what we currently did with the Piedmont Conservation Council. They would be the one writing our grant, administering our grant based on the project that we actually have. Basically, we just give them the information they need, consultation, they look over the projects, and then they do all the administrative work. I mean, that would take such a load off of, for example, we just wrote PARTAF. The number of staff hours that took was immense. I mean, it took, you're talking 40 hours, 50 hours, per person for a couple weeks. So, I mean, it would be a great help to us. And plus the research aspect, I mean, when we're doing our daily jobs, in each department, we do our daily jobs, we're trying to, leadership and all this and that. But when you get tasked down to do the administrative level of the grant, then it takes away from that quality.
Mhm. Well, easily understood and seen. I mean, I don't have any problem with it at all. It would, I think it would enhance each department and their request, as well as their additional revenue stream would make up for the difference there. What was the salary quote on that?
So starting salary appears to be around $45,000, so total cost of the position around 60. Again, that's a minimum salary, so it depends on the qualifications of the applicant. We would also need to make sure that we do a formal review of the position through HR. That's not something we've had an opportunity to do yet, to determine that final salary range before recruiting. That's an approximate cost.
And that salary range would be within the new salary plan?
It would be based on the new salary schedule.
Okay. Well, I think probably the suggestion is good. We had a point in history where it would be, I believe, beneficial to the county. We've just added a new PI position, that another one that was tossed around for a long time, and again, changing dynamics of who we are and what we do, and to become more effective, especially along new streams of revenue. I don't think Amy would be opposed to it. Would help her, so I'm fine with the addition. I don't know about.
I think it'll be a great addition to this county. I mean, you sit there and think about the money that we may not have known that we could have went out and got. And to have this person to be their sole job, the job will pay for itself. I think
Well, at
it'll
one
be a-
time, we talked about a joint grant writer between the schools and the county. So it goes back that far, so it's nothing new. We've seen the need, but I think that need has increased over the past few years with additional grants that are available with the changing scenery, I'll say, in Washington and the state. We need to be more proactive and involved in seeking those grants.
Also helps take the workload off these ladies over here.
It would. I think the departments, though, as John mentioned, are more heavily burdened when having to look for grants. We really, without this position, we don't really have the resources to do what a grant writer is charged to do. And I do think it would be a relief to many of our departments and provide some opportunities that we just haven't been able to tap into.
Okay. Anything else on positions?
That's all that I had for positions, and just to kind of let you know how this will work throughout the budget work session, Finance does have a spreadsheet where they are tracking potential additions or subtractions from the budget based on our discussion. So at the end, when we get down to the number 5 on the agenda, adjustments to the recommended budget, we can look at how those numbers are coming together. So that'll indicate, if everything's gonna fit within the current budget, or if we need to have further discussion around that.
Okay.
Did y'all have anything else about
If
positions?
nothing else, we're moving
Okay.
on to vehicles.
All right. So the question that I have heard, there are 2 things related to vehicles. One is there have been some questions about the request from the sheriff's office. They requested 14 positions, and there are 7 in the recommended budget. So I have given you a chart, which you have seen previously, of the vehicles that they requested and what was recommended. You've also received a copy of the vehicle replacement policy, and again, that is suggested replacement criteria. We do not always follow that exactly, and rarely do, actually. I mean, it's used as a guideline to evaluate the mileage, the age of the vehicle, as well as the mechanical condition to decide which vehicles are highest priority for replacement each fiscal year, given our financial resources. And then you did approve on Monday night to move forward with the purchase of a new ambulance in the current fiscal year's budget. As you know, we had budgeted for one next year. Tom is prepared today to give you some additional information about the current state of our fleet for emergency medical services, so that you can have a little more information as far as whether there is an immediate need to move forward with that purchase that is included in next year's budget or not. But regardless, that the amount that we had included in next year's budget is going to be about $150,000 less. So if you left that in the budget and you wanted to keep the fund balance appropriation the same, or our revenues at the same level as has been recommended, you have about $150,000 to work with there, to fund the new positions. Or we have one other item we need to talk to you about liability insurance. So those are some of the changes that we're working with right now. If we're looking at trying to keep the budget at the same level, or it may come down to increasing the budget or reducing the budget, depending upon discussion today. So would you like to start with the sheriff vehicles or hear from Tom first?
Sheriff's vehicles.
Fine, either way. Fine with me.
All right, well, let's talk about the sheriff's vehicles.
Okay, all right. Anyone here from that department? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, and Ray is here. Ray is our General Services Director. He is responsible for our Fleet Management Fund. He did take the request from the Sheriff's Office. He reviewed it. He did his analysis of mileage, age, and condition of the vehicles, and staff's recommendation, the recommendation coming from Ray, along with all the other vehicle recommendations, was to do the 7. I did accept that recommendation for the budget as far as the overall costs associated with vehicle replacements. That seemed logical to me. I did have conversations with the sheriff about that at the time as far as what I would be recommending. So I did close the loop on that. I understand that he would very much sees a need for these 14 vehicles. We have other vehicles in other departments that have not been recommended, and replacing 7 this year seemed, based on Ray's recommendation and my looking at it, all of the financial implications associated with it, that's where the 7 came from in the recommended budget.
Okay, I've received a spreadsheet on all of the fleet for the sheriff's department. We have a total of 16 that exceed 100,000 miles. The breakdown: Dodge Charger, 111,607 miles. Dodge Charger, 106,060 miles. Dodge Charger, 101,591 miles. Chevy Tahoe, 134, 2 miles. Dodge Ram, 146. Dodge Charger. Now, the Dodge Chargers are patrol vehicles, fast pursuit, high volume use, dangerous position driving. A lot of them have mechanical issues. Another is 112,395 Dodge Charger, 266,000 on a Dodge Charger 708. And they got Ford F-150, 101, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. 110, 266 Dodge Charger, 115, 708 Dodge Charger, 101, 949,000 miles Ford F-150, 118, 985 Ford F-150, 116, 155 Ford F-150, 112, 739 F-150, 121, 848 Jail Interceptor, jail minivan, jail van, and a command freight line at 457,000 miles. Now, I know the jail vehicles are not high pursuit, they're transport vehicles. They're not put in dangerous positions. But these pursuit patrol vehicles are priority, I do believe, with my mind and soul, that we need to add 3 more vehicles to break that 14 number down to a total left of 6 for the following year. That we have 90,000 and approaching 100,000 miles on these other 6 patrols. So it's a real mess.
I went by the sheriff's department Monday and spent some time with the sheriff and Mickey Rogers, and just going over the vehicles. And they told me since November they have spent close to over $39,000 in just maintenance alone on these vehicles, and that's what you're going to run into that problem with all these high mileage vehicles. I'm with Charlie. I think we need to add at least get the Chargers into play. They told me that their number has been cut in half just about the last 3 years. So that's why we're so behind on keeping up with the vehicles with that fleet. So I'm fine with adding 3.
And Commissioner Pereira has indicated he is in favor of it. Adding, there is such a great potential hazard resulting lawsuit awaiting and potential for injury or death to our citizens and our patrolmen.
You recall how many vehicles were replaced last year?
In the sheriff's office, yeah.
4, I think is what he told me.
4.
And now we're at a request for 14 or 15?
14.
14.
7 plus 3 is 10. So
Do we,
we got 16 that are over 100,000 miles.
Yeah, and I get it. I don't have any problem with any of that. But if you read our policy, that's not a drop dead number. There should be some kind of succession plan. I don't know what they do. I don't, that's their responsibility. It's not mine, it's not ours. Oversight is. But, so I don't have a problem with it. I understand. I do understand a little bit about motorized vehicles and the problems with maintenance and the stress on those vehicles because of what they actually do. They're subject to 0 to 100 miles an hour in a split second, and they pretty much run all day. I get it. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. Physical responsibility and a succession plan to me are extremely important here, and as in some other categories with this board, and I think we're doing a fairly good job of taking care of schools, taking care of EMS, taking care of salaries. We're playing catch up in a lot of categories, and this is just another one added to that. If we were to talk about replacing 14 vehicles or even 10, my concern is 4 or 5 years down the road, you're gonna have the same number of vehicles in the same category again. So you got that coming.
We're
We're
only
here.
looking
So
7 plus 3 is 10, so we'll still have 6 that will be in the following year or the year after. And they're already at the 90 plus thousand miles.
I understand, just points of consideration, that a good succession plan for vehicle replacement is, to me, extremely important, and maybe something we need to look at in the future, not today. We'll talk about that kind of thing later. But it's, I think it's important for us to be physically responsible for taxpayer money, and that's what we're doing. We're spending somebody else's money, and it's And we put safety as a priority, as exemplified by the recommended budget. We're looking at nearly 25% in public safety. And that does include not only sheriff, but other vehicles as well. Again, I don't have a problem. On that spreadsheet that I saw somewhere, there were 3 vehicles that were considered, and I think I'm using the right terminology, undercover vehicles. Which in my mind, I'm not talking CIS on TV, but what kind of vehicle do you want as an undercover vehicle? Where is that vehicle going as an undercover vehicle? Is it going to be a new unmarked Dodge Charger? Or is it going to be something that is worn? I mean, it's something that's been used quite a bit, and it needs to blend in with the terrain and the area that they're going to. It's not going to need to stand out as a brand new vehicle here at this particular drug location. So certain points that need to be considered there. And there are 3 of those in that category that are considered undercover vehicles. And so
But they're not in the recommendation, they're not beyond their mileage stuff.
So, all things considered, and we need to throw that in the mix as we talk about this. Now, could I go along with 10 cars? Yeah, I can do that, and, as a vote. But, again, points to be considered by this board and what's going to come down the pike next year. And we're going to have the same scenario next year.
Because,
Well, we're
because
gonna have
of
these
years-
leftovers that we
years-
don't. Yeah.
Years of not acting.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, if we do the 10 versus the 14, you got 4 in that category already. Then, how many more are going to come to that threshold of 100,000 miles during the next year? So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And I will note that there are, of the recommended vehicles, they are predominantly the Chargers. There are only 2 Chargers that were not recommended for replacement. One of those has a mileage of 86,706. It is an older vehicle, it's a 2009 vehicle, so it does have age on it. And then the other one has 101,591. That is the other one that was not recommended in this current budget. And they have noted that there's some electrical issues in that particular one. So there are 6 Chargers that are recommended, as well as the replacement of a Dodge Ram truck. So the other vehicles that were not recommended are a Ford Interceptor, which is an unmarked jail vehicle, an F-150 was not recommended, a Dodge Caravan minivan was not recommended, and an Econoline van was not recommended for replacement. So I did want to note that. There's also another F-150, which is a Dodge Durango Pursuit, it says, with 116,000. So, or they would replace that F-150 with a Dodge Durango Pursuit. So just to put it in the context, I'm not sure, if we were to do 3 additional ones, if there are specific vehicles that have been identified as priorities from this list, because that does drive the amount that would need to be budgeted for them. And it doesn't look like they're requesting to replace 3 Chargers beyond what's already been recommended. And I don't see anybody to speak to that.
They were in trial today. What they told me, it was 2 Chargers, and the prison van was the one that's in need so bad that they transport.
So that's the Ford Econoline van. So that's the one with 104,190. It says to replace with the Ford Transit, and that also includes the installation of a transport insert. Is that correct, Ray? Would
Yes.
that be the one for the jail? Okay.
my thoughts are, first of all, the safety of the officers driving the cars. I think it's very important that we, I would hate for something to happen to one of our officers because they were in a car that had equipment issues and had an accident, and you look at the mileage, and it is a concern. I mean, they're putting their lives on the line every time they have to do pursuit, whether it be traffic or be criminal or something of that nature. So it's very important. I guess one of my questions, when I look at the dates here of the vehicles, is that when they were purchased? And when we purchase cars, they're brand new when we purchase them, is that correct? So when I look at these dates, this is when they were purchased, pretty much.
Are you looking at a sheriff spreadsheet?
Yeah, I'm looking at this where it says 2014 Ford Interceptor, 2015 F-150.
Yeah, they were purchased new, and that's the date.
Yeah, okay. So, and I've said this before, and I'll say it now, and when I've had this discussion with other commissioners, you know, getting the 10 cars that they request, I know they wanted 14. I mean, I said, if you want 14, okay, where's the money gonna come from? And I certainly hope that when this is all said and done, that we're gonna be able to work this out, because I'd hate to think that we have to go and say we're gonna raise our taxes because of 3 or 4 cars. And I think that would be, we shouldn't, and hopefully we won't be in that situation. But that would not be a good thing, in my opinion, to raise taxes for 3 cars, right? So I am okay with the 10 cars. I wish we could give them 14. My concern is that how do we prevent ourselves from getting in this situation down the road? How do we set this up so that we're not looking at a request of 14 cars at one time? And that's something we need to look at, we need to work towards. I can't control what happened in county commissioners before me, years before me, can't do that. But we can make those changes now as a board here, and we can say, okay, let's put this plan in place so we're not having to have this big of a hit, you know, every year. So certainly, as I said, the safety is very important to me, of these officers, and I have no problem at all with the 10 cars request.
I don't think any of us would disagree with everything you just said. Safety is a priority with all of our employees countywide in every department. Certainly this one is outstanding because of its nature and what they actually do. So I don't think you're going to get any argument against what you're saying at all. And we aren't going to develop any kind of plan going forward today. We're looking at numbers today as dollars and cents. That's what we're going to do for this current budget discussion and going forward next year. And that's something that I've talked to Manager Kathy about. I wish we had somebody from that department here today to share some of their feelings along that line, but we don't. So some sort of logical vehicle replacement plan going forward is what we need to begin some discussions about after we do this budget, after we get into the next fiscal year, so that we don't come to this point. We could pretty much eliminate this discussion with a good plan. And that's one of the objectives I'd like to see done going forward. But again, we're dealing with this today. I don't have a problem with the 10 cars. That's not it. Number one, I look at it from fiscal accountability, because we are spending taxpayer money. And it's sort of like I'm going to hand over my checkbook to Commissioner Sims, and he's going to spend my money. And we need to take the same approach to taxpayer money, regardless of cars or Parks and Rec or DSS, PATS, anybody here. We need to approach it from that commonsensical standpoint and be responsible to the taxpayer, because we are spending their money, but, so again, I don't have a problem with the 10 cars. I'm fine with that. I do think, though, it warrants further discussion into next year.
Yes, we can bring the replacement policy back for review. It has been in place since 2011, so it is time for a review of that policy. And as you know, we have gotten somewhat behind over the last couple of years due to supply chain issues and financial constraints. So we can reevaluate how we've been reviewing the replacements in the new fiscal year and put a plan in place for next year.
I just have one more question. The 10 cars that we're replacing, will they go into, for sale? Is that the plan?
That's generally the plan, yes, sir.
On average, what do we look at getting out of these cars when we put them up for auction?
It all depends on the year model and mileage, but just say a Dodge Charger, 2015 model, maybe $7,000 to $8,000.
Okay. And that money will go back into the general fund?
It goes back into the fleet fund,
Fleet
and
fund.
then the money it resides within that fund, and it is able to fund any overages that we might find if a quote comes in higher when it comes time to purchase the vehicle, or other needs, and also if there's something unexpected, such as a wrecked vehicle that we need to replace. We'd have insurance proceeds, but we may need to make up the difference with that, and that's where that funding comes into play.
Would it help with repairs, if we have repairs, or is that a separate fund for us?
Repairs are paid out of departmental budgets, except for, Ray can probably,
Excuse me, repairs once they're designated surplus, I have a repair line to prepare them for sale. But as Manager Kathy is saying, when they are repaired on a general basis, every department has its own repair budget.
Okay, thank you.
And the sale of those vehicles, to Mr. Fashi's credit, has been good. Better to do it the way than put it in a state surplus or some other area. So we get a big bang for our buck through what Mr. Fashi does, and wise move financially for those vehicles.
I'd like to add one more comment here. In doing this procedure we're looking at currently, we know that the cost of the vehicles are X amount this year. We don't have a clue what they're gonna be next year. So I think it's imperative that we move forward with these added 3. And if we need to make a motion, I'm ready to make a motion.
so right now, what our finance staff is doing is they're keeping a running total of what you have discussed today. So the last item on our agenda will be to look at those numbers and how that impacts the bottom line of the budget, so you can then make a decision about moving forward.
That's right.
Good?
While we're speaking and recommending, she's doing the math. She's coming up with the bottom line.
Right.
And so we'll look at later.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else on vehicles?
Well, there is some information that
Yeah.
Tom would like to present to you about the ambulance fleet, and he does have a presentation. You have a printout of the slides, and then we will display the presentation on the monitor.
Good morning, sir.
Okay, just like we do with the sheriff's office just now, I kind of want to talk to you about the current state of our ambulance fleet, sort of following up our discussion on Monday. So basically, we have 6 ambulances in our fleet. They're numbered 4 through 9, as you can see on the screen. So basically, really the oldest ambulance in the fleet is the 2016 Ford, which is number 4, moving down there. And you'll see the number 9, ambulance number 9 is the 2015 Ford. That's the latest ambulance into the fleet, but that's actually a used truck, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. And then the bottom line there is a demo Ford. That's a demo truck that actually we're getting ready to actually do an inspection on. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's our current fleet. You can see the mileage there for the vehicles as well. But I'm going to break those down a little bit further as we go through the presentation. So EMS 4, that's a 2016 Ford F450 4x4 diesel at 206,584 miles currently. Its manufacturing was Demers Manufacturing, which is a Canadian company. Even though it's the oldest vehicle in the fleet at 206,000 miles, it's probably the most mechanically sound truck we have in the fleet. It just is. Currently, the air conditioning doesn't work, but it's the most mechanically sound truck that we have. One of the unique features of the Demers trucks is none of the windows open in the back, so you can't get airflow in the back of the truck, so air conditioning is a bit of a problem. But it is the most mechanically sound. However, it needs some significant work both to the exterior body and to the interior of the truck. But mechanically, it's a sound truck, so even though it's high mileage, it's fairly mechanically sound. So that's kind of where we are with that individual truck. EMS 5, 6, and 7 are road rescues. That's the brand truck. They're all Ford F450s, 4x4 diesels, and you can see the mileage there. So they're all in sort of that 150,000 mile range. These are basically cheaply made trucks, for lack of a better term. They were, I'm guessing, were purchased because they were affordable, for lack of a better term. They have wood interior structures. The problem with wood interior structures is because of the abuse the boxes take, the amount of flex that the boxes take, these interiors just don't hold up. Okay, the Demers are aluminum, all aluminum boxes, so they tend to hold up to the flex and stress of these. All three of these trucks, since delivery, we've had electrical issues with these trucks. I mean, since delivery, we've had electrical issues. We've had very poor success with the service vendor getting repairs done on these trucks. They're obviously out of warranty at this time based on their age. All of them have mechanical issues. All of them need body work to fix exterior damage. But the biggest issue with these three trucks is every single one of them has electrical issues. And I'll explain a little bit more as we go. So EMS 5, again, ongoing electrical issues, but it probably is the most reliable of the three of the road rescues. But it needs some pretty significant body work due to damage. EMS 6 was involved in a significant wreck right after delivery. It probably should have been totaled but because it was a new truck, the insurance wouldn't total it. It was involved in an accident here in the county. It hit a F350 hard enough to flip that truck over, but they did not total the truck. It took a year. It was out of service for a year, getting repairs done to it. Since we've gotten that truck back, we've had nothing but problems with that truck consistently since we got that truck back. Recently, we had an electrical fire in the oxygen cabinet. Fortunately, or unfortunately, didn't catch the oxygen on the fire, but we had a fire in the oxygen cabinet. That truck is currently out of service. It has been to 4 different shops recently trying to figure out the electrical problem, and honestly, none of the service centers will touch it because they can't figure out what the problem is. EMS 7 was involved in a wreck in Durham in March of 2023. It was not our driver's fault. It's been out of service since March of 2023. It is currently in Kernersville. They are trying to, it has front end damage. The frame on the front end is bent. They're trying to straighten the frame on that truck. I don't know if anybody has ever experienced that before. I have some serious concerns how this truck is going to drive when we get this truck back. I've had an experience with this, not on an ambulance, but on a F350 where somebody straightened the frame on the truck and that truck never drove right after that.
Could I ask you a question there?
Yes, sir.
They are Fords.
Yes, sir. They are
And
Fords.
Ford, the smaller vehicles went to an aluminum structure a few years ago. Is this a steel or?
This is steel, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
okay. All right, sorry.
Yeah,
Go
no,
ahead.
you're fine. When we get that truck back, we need to replace the OEM bumper. That bumper was destroyed. That's on back order. They're trying to find us a bumper. They can't find us a bumper. We're also going to have to replace the push bumper on that truck. Before that truck was wrecked, we knew we needed to replace the electrical inverter on that truck again. This will be, we've put several inverters on this truck. I don't know how many. We've put several inverters on this truck. They keep burning up. Again, it's part of this electrical issue with these trucks. That's about a $4,000 replacement every time we have to replace the inverter. So we know we have to put another inverter on that. We'll also need new front-end graphics, lights, and possible siren horns to put that truck back in service when we get it back. So that's the state of that truck. EMS 8's 2021 450, 65,000 miles. It was involved in a wreck in fall of 2022 versus a parked car, moderate impact damage. It is also a Demir, so it's an aluminum frame truck or aluminum box truck. It needs front end repairs to the right fender. Push bumper needs to be replaced, but it's relatively mechanically sound at this time. The next truck is EMS 9. So this is the 25th. This is the used truck. So this is a 2015 Ford F450 at 92,000 miles. When the truck that was totaled in Durham, we had to replace the truck, as Manager Kathy said earlier, due to supply chain issues and in-stage manufacturing issues. Trying to buy a new truck just wasn't an option. We just couldn't get one. So I searched the market for used trucks. Was able to find a used truck that belonged to a volunteer agency in Virginia that was being sold by a third-party reseller. We used the insurance proceeds from the wrecked truck plus some county funds to purchase that vehicle. Honestly, right now, it's probably one of the best riding trucks we have in the fleet. We do know that we're going to need some suspension work done on the front end of that truck. What I like about the Horton, which is the manufacturer, is they do have a repair shop in Ashland, Virginia, so it's not too far away. It's in the southern Richmond area. They do have a maintenance facility there, so we are looking to partner with them to everything aside except for routine maintenance, oil changes, stuff like that, to have them be our maintenance facility. And we'll talk about why that's important here in a minute. And then we have our demo ambulance. So when our truck was wrecked, we knew we had to make a purchase, so we purchased the used truck, but then we started looking for, we know we're gonna need to replace a truck. So again, due to manufacturing issues, I reached out to Horton, which is a vendor I've worked with for probably 2 decades now. I reached out to them and said, what do you have? They had a truck that they were building as a demo truck, meaning that they were going to use this to take to shows and take around to potential customers, stuff like that. So I sweet talked them into saying, would you sell me your demo? So they agreed to sell me their demo. The benefit to the county was we didn't have to pay all the engineering costs, so we were able to get it at a cheaper price. The downside to buying a demo is you can't really change it. It is what it is, right? So they did agree to sell me their demo. We purchased it in March of 2022. Flying out next week to do the inspection on that truck. So you can see it's been over a year. Flying out in June to do the inspection. We probably will not see it here in the county to put it in service till probably October. So that tells you this is the timeline to get trucks, right? The reason that this truck was more expensive than the trucks that we talked about earlier is because it was a demo. There was more after-marketing outfitting that I had to do because this was never intended to be a clinical truck. This was intended to be a demo truck, so there were more aftermarket costs that I had to do to make this a clinical truck, if that makes sense. Ms. Kathy asked me to talk about what the replacement order would be. In my opinion, and this is the potential replacement order because I don't know what's going to happen between now and and then, my potential replacement order, quite honestly, right now, EMS 7's at the top of my list because I have some serious concerns what's going to happen when we get this truck back with the frame issue and then all the ongoing electrical issues. And then EMS 6, EMS 5, which are the other 2 road rescues. Then EMS 8, and then EMS 4, which is the last Demir's truck due to age and mileage. What I do want to point out here, though, is that all of our trucks really need to be pulled offline. They have long-standing maintenance issues that just need to be addressed that we can't address because we can't take them offline. So as we get trucks in, we do need a period of time to pull these trucks offline, send them to get them repaired, correctly so that we can, try to get some longevity out of these trucks. One of the questions, and I did not put this in the slide, but it was, somebody made one of the commissioners made the comment earlier, and that was about budget. Somebody mentioned the sheriff's office maintenance budget. So our maintenance budget for this year was $79,000. That was our maintenance budget. We exceeded our maintenance budget already, okay? Finance was gracious enough to find us more money and added another $17,000 to our maintenance budget, for a total of $94,000 in our maintenance budget. As of today, we have $12,000 left in that budget. If we get EMS 7 back before the end of the fiscal year, we will exceed that $12,000 just trying to put that truck back in service. So again, if you're doing the math, we will have almost spent $100,000 in maintenance just trying to keep these trucks on the road, just to give you some idea of what our maintenance costs are. Okay. Some things that we've already discussed, maintenance plan. This is a huge issue for us, and that's why I brought up the Horton shop in Ashland. We get maintenance done on the market, right? Whatever shop can get us in, that's where we have to go get maintenance, because we don't have a county garage. We just have to go to whatever local dealer can get us in to get maintenance. We don't get priority. We go wherever we can get maintenance, and that's, to me, that's not a plan, right? So we really need to figure out a better maintenance plan. If the Horton shop can do a better job for us, then I think that's an option worth exploring. Do we do some sort of contractual agreement with them? I've talked to Ms. Kathy and finance about, once we get through this budget process, potentially looking at a municipal lease option, where, again, addressing some of your concerns, where we have a fleet replacement plan, where we have a defined plan where we're rolling vehicles in the fleet, we're rolling vehicles out of the fleet, and it sort of levels out your budget, so you're not getting these spikes in your budget. So we're rolling vehicles out in a predictable manner. And, we've talked about selling vehicles, again, working in other localities, instead of waiting until we, drive these vehicles into the ground, maybe replacing these vehicles sooner so you get a higher resale value back for these vehicles, and then you roll that money back into your budget. So it's something that we at least want to look as an option to maybe level out the budget a little bit. And then Ms. Kathy mentioned the fleet replacement schedule was done in 2011. I think we need to go back and revisit that fleet replacement schedule. 250,000 miles, which is currently what's listed for an ambulance, to me is ridiculous. For all the same reasons that you just said. I know we're concerned about the sheriff's office, driving emergency, that kind of stuff. We're doing the same thing. We're driving an emergency. We've got 2 people in the truck. Potentially, we've got a patient in the truck. But yet, we're saying it's okay that our vehicles have over 250,000 miles on them. And to me, that's just not acceptable. So I think we need to go back and relook at what that schedule looks like. And the thing we've not talked about today is we have other vehicles in our fleet besides ambulances. And that needs to be factored into that fleet plan as well. So, any questions?
I do have one. You mentioned we didn't have a facility to repair these vehicles. We have a practically brand-new school bus garage. Do we not have qualified mechanics there to do the type of work that needs to be done to these?
So what I
Service
can tell
vehicles?
you, so that's not an option that I've explored. What I have been told is that there has been some hesitancy from the school board to take that on. I mean, I'm sure they have their workload as well, right? But for emergency vehicles, there is a specific certification that you need to work on emergency vehicles. And I'm not saying they wouldn't, I'm just saying that I've not had that conversation with them.
Okay. Just thought, something that we could potentially look
Yes, sir.
into,
Yes,
getting
sir.
somebody certified
Yes, sir.
and working with the schools to use those garages,
Yes, sir.
that garage.
Another subject that has been broached in the past and talked about, and the qualifications and certifications are definitely different. I don't know what their fleet is right now, yellow buses, plus I guess the others are blue or white, whatever, but the yellow buses are the main ones, and that category might be 70 roughly. Here again, I don't know. But almost like sheriff's vehicles and EMS vehicles, it's a different category. And again, requiring different certifications and expertise. And then you enter into the time factor. I mean, I don't know how many employees they have, per man, per bus, I don't know. Personally, we can look into it, no problem with that, but I don't see the two blending. It's a totally different ballgame, so to speak. So, anyway. We are looking at purchasing one out of this current year's fund balance.
Yes, sir.
And keeping one in the 24 budget, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
Are they in order here that you're showing on page 5? EMS 7, replace first?
That would be the truck I would replace first. Again, that's my potential replacement based on, I have concerns about that truck's frame when it comes
So
back.
that's your priority?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then the one that's coming in the proposed new budget, that would be your next replacement?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So sequentially, down the line,
Yes, sir.
do that replace. There was a third vehicle mentioned someplace in our talks.
So we have the demo ambulance coming next, potentially,
would-
so in October. So that could potentially replace EMS 7. Then we have ordered
Okay.
one, which still may be 12 to 18 months
Oh,
out.
yeah.
We haven't ordered it. You approved it Monday night, so we still have to go
Right.
through that whole process. So that could potentially be 12 to 18 months out.
Mhm.
So that could replace EMS 6.
Mhm.
So then if we were to order another one in fiscal year 24, then you are down to the third one on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Again, another 12 to 18 months out potentially. And there's something else I was going to say.
And if you don't mind, while she's
Right,
thinking
sure.
about that, let me just talk about that for a minute. So,
Mhm.
ambulance chassis are different than, say, just a regular Ford 450, 550 chassis. It's a specific chassis, right? So Ford makes about 540 ambulance chassis a year. That's what they make. They're 1,400 chassis behind as of today. So that's why it's taking 18 to 24 months to get an ambulance. It's not building the ambulance, it's getting the chassis. That's the delay. So again, kind of our discussion Monday night is the sooner I order the chassis, the quicker I can get it, right? So, but that's the rate at which they're producing the chassis. They do 540 a year, they're already 1,400 behind.
And what I was going to mention was just, Tom already has acknowledged this, that there are unforeseen circumstances that could change the ordering here in terms of the priority for replacement. I mean, that bent frame is significant, something that we would not have anticipated or planned for this particular vehicle. So this would be positioning ourselves to be able to maintain our fleet. And we are experiencing, as he noted Monday night, needing to borrow from Caswell County much more than we would like to. That increases the liability on us. It's very, very gracious of them to be able to lend to us, but it's not the same vehicles that our staff are accustomed to driving. It's their property, not ours, and we're taking away from them. So we certainly do not want to continue to be in a position where we need to borrow, that we have a fleet that's sufficient to meet our needs. That's the goal.
So going forward now, we would theoretically order one before July 1.
Yes, sir.
Right. How soon into the next budget year would we make that second purchase if we leave that one in there?
I'd make it July 2nd if I had the choice.
Yes. Either way, you're looking at 12 to 18 months.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. The sooner the better. That's good. I agree with that. Go ahead, sir.
I have a question. I don't mean to, I don't want to step on anybody's toes or anything here, but I noticed we had 3 wrecked vehicles
Yes, sir.
when you report this. And my question is, again, we've talked about staffing. We've talked about the long hours that people have had to work
Yes, sir.
with your department. And, you know, part of that concern at those long hours factors in to someone driving an ambulance. And I don't know what the safety standard is as far as someone who's been up for 24 hours or whatever they've been up, and then driving an ambulance, you know?
Yeah.
To me, that's a concern. What type of training are the drivers? Are they getting a special certification for driving an ambulance, or what happens with that?
Yes, sir. So all of our drivers go through what's called an emergency vehicle operators course. So when they are hired, they go through that emergency vehicles operators course. So they do get that training. I do want to say, of those 3 accidents that we discussed, 2 of those accidents were not our fault. We were hit by other drivers.
I
just want to make that point clear.
You
Now,
made that
one
clear.
of them, we hit a parked car. That was our fault. Yes, sir.
And
Um,
I'm not, you know, again, it wasn't, again, that's my concern, because
Yes.
we talk about staffing.
But
And
it is a
I don't know what
concern
you-
for me.
What your rules or policy is as far as driving behind, you know, being in the ambulance and being a driver, if you have anything as far as limiting the hours, or is, you really don't have anything?
I don't have the staff to do that, sir. I wish I did.
Okay.
We, obviously we work in pairs, so we use a buddy system, and if, somebody feels that they can't drive, then they switch off with their partner. I don't have the staff to have mandatory rest time. I don't have it. I routinely have people working 24, 36, 48-hour shifts,
Right.
because that's what we're doing to keep trucks on the road.
It's a little scary, but for me.
It's
you know.
very scary for me.
So, I guess the other thing is, when we do have accidents or something, I guess the insurance, whoever was at fault, we are following up, and we're getting we're taking care of that from our insurance side of the point
Yes, sir.
of view as being our vehicle. So,
Yes, sir.
hopefully we're not running into any issues with that, but that's good. I appreciate what the EMS is doing. I know it's a very stressful job, and certainly with the vehicles that we've approved to date, and again with the one we talked about last meeting, work towards that. Work to try to get you guys safer vehicles, ones with less mileage and what have you, and it's just going to take some time, but we'll get there. I believe. So that's my thoughts on it. I wish we could just like snap our finger and replace all of them, but anyway.
I appreciate your
Thank you.
presentation, excuse me, and the time and effort put into this that helps us better understand your position. Again, very well done, very well structured and laid out, so that we can take a look at this, and we understand your plight better, I believe, because of your very knowledgeable approach to presenting to this board your needs, and not only just a need, but a justification for those needs, and going forward, how to solve some of those. And I think we're all concerned with your number of employees and the fatigue factor that's there. Very, very stressful and hard to deal with. It's not on the same plane by any means, but Manager Kathy and I were on the clock, so to speak, probably at 6 o'clock yesterday morning to meet and leave and spend an entire day out of town, and back last night at 9 o'clock, roughly. So, yeah, fatigue sat in on me overnight. So it's crucial, and we need to factor in those things to do the very best we can for you and the safety and well-being of our citizens going forward. And again, I thank you for your time and expertise. Yes, sir.
I just have one more thing. On the EMS number 4, Air conditioning is currently out of service, box windows do not open. We're in the summer, we're getting ready to be in the summer months, it's gonna get hot. What's the plan on fixing the air conditioner? Because I'd hate to have to ride in that vehicle in 90-degree, 100-degree heat to answer calls, and, you know, I'm just wondering, what's the game plan on that?
Right now, that vehicle's in service because I have to have it in service or I don't have a truck. We're waiting on parts to fix the air conditioning.
Okay, I mean,
I'm just being honest with you, sir.
Right.
I can't afford to take it out of service.
Mm,
I'm waiting on parts.
okay.
How long have you been waiting?
I believe about a week and a half.
How long?
I believe about a week and a half.
Well, I would hope-
We were borrowing a truck from Caswell. Caswell needed their truck back, so I didn't have a choice but to put it back in service.
Well, it's also the morale of the people who drive the truck and ride that truck. You gotta think about them. But I would hope, as soon as those parts come in, that it wouldn't take that long to get the parts in, to get the air conditioner in
I just need
and get
parts.
it going. Do you carry that locally, or is there somewhere you have to carry it out of town with the air conditioner?
No, we have a local shop. We're waiting on parts.
Okay, good.
Is that with Ralph's Auto?
I believe Brands is doing the work.
Brands?
I believe Brands is
Okay,
doing the work.
I think I've seen a vehicle up there, emergency service vehicle up there at Ralph's before.
We will take vehicles wherever we can get them fixed.
Okay. First come, first serve. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
appreciate it, man.
The next item on our agenda is Medicaid expansion, and our DSS Director Carlton Paler is here to provide you with some more information on that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you all?
Good.
So I appreciate the time to be able to come before you today. So I want to talk about Medicaid expansion. I believe the county manager gave you all some information earlier to review.
And I did, and I apologize, I also skipped over the VFD paid staffing, but we can go back to that.
That's all right.
You do have some handouts, this is, I just had this ready to give to you today. This has been a work in progress.
Yes, ma'am.
There is a listing there as far as positions. It's at the bottom of your, yeah, you've got it. There's a chart on the front that's printed in black and white that has the listing for the new position requests that Carlton will speak about, as well as descriptions that go along with those, in a letter from the state that does talk about Medicaid expansion. This has been evolving. It's still not set in stone as far as dates, and we are trying to move ahead based on the information available. And some of this, even just yesterday, Carlton was working through at the state level exactly what the best option is for us. So he'll talk about that.
Yes, ma'am. So Medicaid expansion was legislation was signed into law by Governor Cooper back in March of '23 in House Bill 76. With this implementing expansion to Medicaid expansion, it did give us the county some funding. So some monthly funding allotments that will be available after October 1st as well. So in response to these immediate needs, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services is allocating some funds to counties to support the efforts in the interim to provide from now until the funding of SL 23-7 is available after October 1st of 23. So they have given us a allocation of $197,544 and another allocation of $48,516. So it comes to a total of $246,060. With the because this never happened in North Carolina before, with Medicaid expansion, they're expecting that we're going to be expanding Medicaid with 27% here in Person County. Currently, we have a little over 11,941 current Medicaid cases here in Person County. We have two Medicaid units, Family and Children Medicaid and Adult Medicaid. And you all know that that Person County is an elderly population. But they're thinking that Family and Children's Medicaid is going to be expanding more. So we have two units. Each unit we have more than 12 employees. Also, Medicaid is your most unit that is financial risk at paybacks. We have currently a RETA audit, redetermination eligibility, audit, there's other audits, and any time that there is a risk of approving someone for Medicaid that shouldn't have been, that is a payback to the state, and it can be very costly. As you can see here in this humble request, we're looking for adding an additional supervisor, 2 Medicaid employees, and 2 staff development specialists. Unfortunately, the state has given us these mandates of having these programs here in the county, but they do not provide training for our employees. They just provide some websites and things, some webinars to review and NC Fast. And so what we're taking upon ourselves is to be more accountable, more efficiently, and trying to have our own trainers. And we met with DHB, was Division of Health Benefits. They came about a week and a half ago. Eva Fulcher, who's the Deputy Director of County Operations, which is over Medicaid, stated that they believe that Medicaid expansion will begin October 1st or November 1st at the latest. If that is the case, we're already behind, because we're going to need to go ahead and get the positions in, get people trained before people start applying for Medicaid. You should have also a paper looking like this here. If you look at the back of that paper, I got some data from the state, and these are providers receiving medical payments, state overview, and this is just for Person County. So in state fiscal year 2022, here in Person County, there was $5.5 million of professional claims, institutional 9.5, pharmacy a little over $2 million. So you had just $17 million just here in Person County coming through Medicaid. One of the things I'd like to state, and looking back at the front sheet that I just showed you, is that Medicaid is 75% reimbursable. That means that the county's only portion is 25% for each of these positions. That's going to be one of the largest reimbursements that you'll ever have at DSS.
And my understanding, Carlton, correct me if I'm wrong, is
Yes, ma'am.
that the funding that is approximately $250,000 that we are receiving in this fiscal year, and we are directed by the state to carry forward that into the next fiscal year,
Correct.
is to cover that 25%. The counties,
To cover the
and the
75.
federal, is to
Right.
cover the federal.
75%.
75% until the federal funding becomes available October 1st.
Correct.
Once the session law goes into effect. But it is also meant to cover the county's portion of 25%, because the state has said this will not be an unfunded mandate for counties. So
That-
this is meant to cover our expenses.
We don't know exactly what the amount's going to be in October, but there is more funding to come provided for this, correct?
Right, the state has ongoing revenues allocated, according to the letter that they sent us. It's a monthly allocation going out to counties in the amount of $1.667 million. We do not know exactly what will be coming to us out of that allocation, but this initial funding is bridge funding, and then the intent is that the state will have a revenue stream that will continue each month that an expansion is effective to cover the remaining costs of the position, so that the county is not assuming the expenses.
Not assuming all of the expenses. We don't know exactly how much it's going to be. They haven't told us all
So,
the time.
right, there are still some questions, but just to let you know that 75% will be coming from the federal government.
Mhm.
We will be receiving money from the state as well, although we do not know exactly what that looks like.
So there are a lot of unknowns.
That is correct.
And a long,
We're-
and an extended time frame to kind of ramp up to prepare for when this goes into effect. As Carlton mentioned, we do have to get approval from the state to add positions in the first place, then we have to go
Correct.
through a recruitment period, and then a training period. So that is why he's coming to the board now to request to use this bridge funding that the state is releasing to us in this fiscal year, to go ahead and add the workers that are needed to meet the 27%, is that what you
Correct.
said
Yes,
is
ma'am.
anticipated
Mhm.
caseload increase
And-
due to Medicaid expansion?
And the unfortunate thing is they passed this in March. And so we were already passed through our original budget that was turned in back in February to the county manager. And now they're looking at possibly turning this and starting us in October 1st. They're not really giving us enough time to do things that we need to do adequately.
And they passed the law, but it's still tied to the budget process. That's why we don't have some of this definitive information, because the state budget will have some of the provisions in it that will govern how this actually is implemented.
So the legislature's doing the same thing we're doing today. It could change. We don't know what they're gonna do. And that makes our job harder, your job
Yes, sir.
more difficult because of dealing with unknowns. And so that puts us in sort of a bad place. I like dealing with facts, not unknowns. So,
These positions are required by the state we're looking at? No?
They're not required. This is what Carlton and his staff, in conjunction with discussions with state staff,
Correct.
have determined would be needed by Person County to meet the increased demand workload associated with Medicaid expansion when that goes into effect.
So Medicaid is a mandated program.
Mhm.
And so the cost that we were looking at, what, 85 for this?
Yes, sir.
Are we saying we think, or based on what the state and the legislature's gonna do, that they would cover this as well?
That's an opportunity, it's very possible. So the total cost is $341,280. We are looking at just at $250,000, so it's $85,320 left over, and we could receive that by October.
Right. And then, of course, if it doesn't, then we have to, this is probably going into the budget, we have to figure out where we're going to pay, or where this money's going to come from, right?
Right, so we're looking at total salary and benefits for these 5 additional positions at $341,000. We do know that those are reimbursable 75% by the
Right.
state. So the 25% of that is $85,000 for the annual cost. We do have $250,000 coming in this year, so that is meant to cover new positions, so personnel expenses, so it will have to pay the federal portion up until the federal payments kick in October 1st. And again, we're not going to be hiring anyone immediately.
No, we're not.
We're gonna be into the new fiscal year, so we're gonna have more information between now and then. But if the board indicates support for this plan, then we can go ahead and move forward with putting the mechanisms in place.
Yes, ma'am.
This is also, that bridge funding was also meant to cover any expenses that we have to add office space for Medicaid expansion, which we may need to do.
No, we don't.
Carlton,
We
you
don't.
will not?
We
Okay.
found
I know
space.
he's in the process of evaluating that, so I didn't know
That's
what
fine.
that came down to. But if
Good.
we were to need to buy additional computers or desks or other equipment for these positions, that bridge funding is also meant to go towards that.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
the program itself is mandated, expansion is mandated, but they're not telling us exactly what we need to do. We're having to evaluate the impact to the county and how we can meet those needs. And this is what our staff has proposed.
Going forward, this is, obviously, this is for the upcoming year we're talking about, the year after that, as we go along. Do we see we're gonna get that 75%, at least we know for the next, as long as this program is continued?
It's 75% reimbursable.
Right.
Everything that we do with Medicaid.
Right, okay. For these positions is what I'm kind of thinking about. Right now, we're talking about with the money coming in, 250, we're talking about that. I'm just thinking down the road, then we're looking at more than 85, possibly.
We are, since these positions are dedicated to Medicaid, then we can expect to get the 75% reimbursement from the federal government on an ongoing basis for these positions. What we're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carlton,
Okay.
what we're not completely certain of is that 25% that would typically be the county responsibility.
Correct.
We have this bridge funding to go towards that, and then the state has a monthly allocation set aside that they are saying will be in effect as long as Medicaid expansion is in effect. So as long as we are continue to be required to serve the additional caseload, then the state would be providing additional funding to us to go towards
That's
that.
what we believe, yes, ma'am.
We just don't know that number.
still unknowns. And correct me if I'm wrong, originally when we were being told about expansion, it was going to be a 90-10.
They went back and forth several times.
Oh, yeah.
I remember. Yes, sir. They've just
Okay. So
been talking
we're-
about this for a long time.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of difference between 90-10 and what we're looking at today.
75-25.
So here again, lots of unknowns. Question, on one sheet, new positions, you had 3?
No, so these positions are not in the recommended budget. When you look at the new position requests, the original request is under the not recommended part. We just did not have enough information at the time. We didn't know anything about these additional revenues coming in.
Correct.
We did not know what the expectations were going to be. So initially, Carlton had looked at requesting the IM Supervisor 2 along with 4 IMC 2 caseworkers to support that additional workload. What he has now come back with, following conversations at the state level, are the supervisor, 2 caseworker 2s, and 2 staff development specialists.
So this one supersedes what you'd previously put
Mhm.
out. So this is the one we're working with today or now.
So this would be in addition to the positions that have already been recommended. So the positions that are listed under recommended, you referenced the 3. Those are converting current part-time positions into full-time positions. So for 2 of those, well, it's basically, it's converting 5 part-time positions to 3 full-time positions is what has been proposed. And those are, we can move forward with those more expeditiously. They are, they will assist in preparing for Medicaid expansion, but not in meeting that demand once it's in place. Carlton has requested the 5 additional
So these-
positions.
Ultimately then, what Amy is plugging in over there on her computer, these 5 plus the other 3.
The other 3 were already in the
Were already
recommended
right,
budget.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But bottom line,
Mhm.
and that's what she's working with. Okay.
Carlton.
Yes, sir.
I think we see, as emails coming in, the turnover rate at the Department of Social Services.
Yes, sir.
Are these positions refilling these lost positions?
The new 5 are not.
These
No,
5
sir.
are not.
The new 5, no, sir.
Okay, so you're still down the positions, or have you refilled the ones that?
We've actually done very well here recently. We've filled a lot of those different
That's
positions.
great.
But one of the things about, I'm glad you mentioned turnover, one of the things is that a lot of the employees in the Medicaid or income maintenance side total, they do not get the proper treatment, training that they should from the state. And so one of the things we have hired a consultant coming in from Durham County, a retired Medicaid trainer to come in and train our folk twice. It's very expensive, and so we want to go ahead and have our own internal trainers, just like a lot of other counties are doing, because unfortunately, we just can't rely on the state to do some of the things that they're supposed to do. So we want to take care of the residents here in Person County. We're just going to get our own trainers, make sure our employees are being trained properly, and so they can enjoy the job better instead of having all this pressure, because we do have the monthly Medicaid report cards as well, that we must make over 85% every month. And if we do not do that consistently for 3 months, or if we fail the report card 5 times out of a year, the state has threatened to come in and take over our Medicaid program, which thankfully, due to the hard work of those ladies, we have not. We've always passed.
Amy, I was just wondering, what number are we plugging in for this?
For the 5 positions. So the total cost would be $341,280. But we have, what we would do, because we're scheduled to receive the $246,060 in this year, we'll record it as revenue in this year. But then we'll appropriate fund balance in the DSS fund to sort of reappropriate those funds to cover at least some of the $341,280. The other will have to be, appropriated for our match as a delay until we get those revenues in October or November.
Okay, so I was just wondering what that number was that we were plugging in.
$341,280.
And then we would, and I just want to clarify too, for our understanding, including mine, so we have the 246,000 coming in this year that we will carry forward.
That's right.
And then we would anticipate the 75% revenue from the federal government. We could at least go ahead and build that in beginning October 1st, correct?
If that's the desire, we can do that. It's just, it's uncertain as to what that's going to be.
Or November 1st.
Yeah. Or we can amend the budget once we know what that is, knowing that it's coming. We can wait until we know what that amount's gonna be and then recognize it then.
And these funds are also stated by the state to help our local hospital and pharmacists and local providers here. So a lot of this pass-through federal government money will come into our local economy. As I stated, 17 million earlier, just in Person County.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you for what you do, and
Yes, sir.
it's a hard job. And I think we just very recently had a child to take care of
Yes, sir.
unexpectedly.
Yes,
Our
sir.
staff is
Some
doing
more.
that.
Yes, sir.
In a very, very bad position to be in, but that's one of the responsibilities of your department and us.
Yes, sir.
and Appreciate what you're doing there.
Thank you, sir.
Sad, but
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
How early do you anticipate that you would be able to get those positions in place?
So unfortunately, one of the situations that all counties face, that ones is not consolidated like us, we have to send in if the positions are approved, we have to send it to Office of State Human Resources.
Right.
And last year, it took, for the deputy director, it took forever, almost November before we got it back. And pretty much all counties are going to be asking for positions, so it may take OSHR, who knows how long. As soon as we get the go-ahead, we will send our paperwork as soon as possible. But to be honest, I would be probably advertising by late September at the earliest.
Well, I asked that because that could give us some funding options for, as far as not having to budget for all 12 months.
Yeah, it won't be, yes, ma'am.
For this, we could back off 3 months, and, 2 months, I guess, if you think you could, September 1st being the
No,
earliest?
I doubt that, to be
Really?
honest. Yes, ma'am.
October 1st being the earliest?
Yes.
Okay, so we could pull 3 months of that budget out and reduce it by that, because ideally, realistically, he's not really gonna be able to get those positions in place until October the 1st. So that helps with some of your funding, so I can go in and calculate that, so I'll let you know what that is.
And that's another reason why I'm before you all now, because how long it's gonna take.
And
But
you-
they didn't give us time to
What you're
prepare.
wanting, I think, is authorization to go ahead and start the process for hiring those positions.
Yes, ma'am.
But for budget purposes, we could pull some of that funding back and only fund to start effective October the 1st.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we should have more information between now and then
Sure.
about what the revenues will look like once the state budget is approved.
Thank you all so
very
much.
good. Thank you, sir.
Have a good day.
Okay, we'll move back up to VFD paid
Yes.
staffing, okay.
So, okay, that's fine. Yes, Tom's here to answer questions too. He may have some more specifics, but we did receive a proposal from the fire chiefs, and this is related to the paid personnel line item within the fire tax district budget. That was approved in this current fiscal year. It's the first time that we have had paid staffing that has been funded by the county in the fire district tax. Thanks. So we are almost a year into that, and the fire chiefs convened a committee to look at how that program has been working and to provide feedback to the commissioners. We currently have about $790,000 in that budget. It is not even 50% spent this year because they have had to work on recruiting and adding paid staffing, but all of the departments currently have paid staffing. What they are proposing within the budget, which we are not asking to increase the line item by more than the $790,000 that's in the recommended budget. But within that amount, to raise the hourly rate for the paid staffing from $15 to $18. The chiefs are also requesting that currently we continue to fund 2 part-time positions, 5 days a week, up to 12-hour shifts in all of the departments except for Timberlake. Their request includes increasing the staffing level for Timberlake to 7 days a week. So 2 part-time positions, 7 days a week, up to 12 hours per shift. So that is keeping the same expectations for all the other departments, but providing some additional staffing to Timberlake. They are asking just to acknowledge some flexibility within this budget for the fire chiefs to manage their departmental allocation and schedule according to the needs of the departments. They may need to do more than the 2 part-time positions in 1 week because they might have hydrant testing, or they may know that they have volunteers that are going to be out on vacation and they might need some additional backup during that period of time. So it's not to say that they are limited to 2 part-time positions every week, but that is the basis for budgeting, and they have some flexibility to use that funding within the amount that is identified for each department. And then we would maintain the current reporting and disbursement procedures that is going through the fire marshal's office, so that we as a county are able to have data on how this funding is being spent, what departments have paid staff, the number of hours that are dedicated to that, and that the funding is only being used for the purpose of paying staff. So just to give you some data behind why the request is to increase the hourly rate from $15 to $18 per hour, we are seeing the current rates in this chart for our surrounding counties. Granville County is implementing their program as of July 1st. They will be paying $18 per hour. We acknowledge that it's important for our departments to all pay the same rate. So our expectation would be that they keep it at 15 currently, and then if it's approved July 1st, then they all would raise the hourly rate to $18 per hour. And the reason for doing that, again, is so that we would not lose that paid staffing to other counties who are paying more. Then we have call volume data that the fire departments supply. This is from 22 through April of 23. And as you see there, Timberlake does have a higher call volume, and that is the basis for the request to add the 2 additional days, sort of the 24/7 scheduling at Timberlake, due to their higher call volume and the support that they are also able to provide to other districts with the additional staffing. So just to give you a look at the budget, the current budget in fiscal year 24 is $790,170 in that line item. As of from July 1st through the end of April, we had spent $265,000 of that, projecting around $60,000 additional would be spent in May and June. So we anticipate having $465,000 remaining in that line item at the end of this fiscal year. So that would go back into the fund balance for the fire district tax fund. I highly doubt we would exceed that $790,000 line item in fiscal year 24. In the event that we did, we could move some of that fund balance to cover it. So you'll see option A and option B there. That does exceed the $790,000 because of the higher hourly rate. But again, they're not going to remain fully staffed and working paid staff continuously in all departments throughout the year. So I don't anticipate needing that full budget. But what we are asking the board to consider is whether you're supportive of Option A, which is for each department to continue to receive an equal allocation, basically. Samora receives less because they are actually a Caswell County department that provides coverage in Person County, so we're funding one position for Samora. Or if you would be supportive of option B, which does provide Timberlake with a higher amount to add those additional 2 days to their staffing model. I have shared with you the proposal that came from the fire chiefs, and each fire chief has signed off in support of option B, acknowledging that their department would receive a specific amount that they would be responsible for managing in conjunction with the fire marshal throughout the year, not to exceed that amount, but acknowledging that Timberlake would receive more for the additional 2 days. So, again, they've all signed off and acknowledged that. They did work through a committee to come up with this proposal. And I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have, and Tom can, as well. As you know, the Fire Marshal's office will become a division of the Emergency Services Department, and he is already stepping in to fill some of the duties that Adam previously fulfilled, working with Lisa and with the VFDs. So we do understand that it's important for us to all know going into the new fiscal year what the expectations are for this paid staffing line item.
I would like to just say that going back, this has been heartburn for me for several months, because since we implemented this, because I think there was some misinterpretation of how we were going to distribute the money, if you will. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at the time we put this in place, the decision was that we wanted, as far as paid personnel, 2 per department, is that we would give them the money for that, and that in the process, they would be working to lower their ISO rating. And so that was the reason why, really why we put it in there, was to give them an incentive and to give them the support and help by adding part-time personnel to help with their ISO rating. And so, and that was supposed evenly distributed at that time. That was what we had said. This department gets this department gets this. And and I understand Timberlake, the calls they've had, and they've had a lot more than any of the other departments. And so, I just want to say that's what the original intent was. And again, I think we do need to come to an agreement on how we want that money to be dispersed with the fire departments. And it appears, based on the letter that you told me, that option B, they all agreed to option B. My only concern, again, going back to when we increased the fire tax, was that we see improvements in the fire departments, the other fire departments, the ones that do not have the personnel that some of the other departments have. Some of them have more, more members, if you will, volunteer firemen, than some of the other departments. But the intent was to get those departments that have a high ISO rating to be lower, not just lower for just the county, but for those people who live in that district. They're the ones that are going to benefit from this ISO rating being lowered with their fire tax, fire insurance. And so that was the intent with that. And I think as a board that that should still be our intent, is to see that these other districts, their fire departments, work towards lowering the ISO rating. And I know they're working toward, I think there's some that are going to have some state inspections coming up, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
3 in August.
Huh?
3 in August.
3 in August. And on top of that, they get extra when they lower their ISO rating. We, as the county, have agreed to a program. We give them, how much is it? two,
It's $7,500 per drop,
Per-
per number drop.
right, per
Right.
drop. So they will get that. So that, and again, that should be an enticement as well, is to try to work towards that. But there's always issues, as I said, personnel could be a problem. So again, that was the reason for the volunteer fire departments to do that. And so, they're happy with this, with the 126.9, per fire department. So if and this is the budget, so if another fire department wanted to say, we need more, then where would that come from? I mean, you got 126, let's say someone says, oh, we need to raise ours to 140 or something down the road through the year. Is there where would that money come from if there was anything like that? Let's say they want to increase their personnel, okay? And where would that money come from?
Well, I'll just say, the expectation is, this is what we're agreeing to for this fiscal year. If anything changes, they would need to come back through a process to request additional funding. If we ever needed to add to their allocated amount, so I guess what we're saying is, yeah, you're right, okay. So what we're saying is, if they were to, they should not exceed this. If they are meeting the expectation of 2 part-time positions, 5 days a week for most of the departments except Timberlake, at the $18 per hour, this is what they should expect to spend during the course of the year. If they were to go over this, I mean, we would have a red flag that was going to happen sooner in the fiscal year. If they had some operating need that would justify adding more, then they would need to come back through a request process to do that. That there would be funding available for that. It would either be allocating it out of fund balance, or we also have an unallocated line item that we have actually budgeted for in the next fiscal year that's meant to support those ISO bonuses and other needs that may arise. But it would be they would have to come back through a request process. They are acknowledging that this is their budget for paid staffing for the current year or next year.
All right, so my question is that, I mean, we're gonna have, what, 465,000 that is not gonna be used, projected year in balance of what's left in the account, and that money is going to go to the fund, what fund, where's that gonna go?
It stays within the fire district tax fund. It goes
Okay.
into that fund balance, and it remains there for fire services and rescue services specifically.
So is it for equipment, if they come to us and say they need equipment or anything?
It could be allocated through an approval process, but it goes back into fund balance for the next year, and it's not a part of the budget until a request is made to add it to the budget.
So at the rate we're going, I mean, I see even with option B, I see that there's gonna be a year in balance again down the road.
Most likely.
And so, and what do we have in fund balance now? What do we have in that?
I don't know.
I don't know, I'll have to pull that up. Give me just a second and I'll let you know.
While she's doing that, I think this is another area that this board has done an excellent job in hearing the people's needs. And when we talked about a fire tax, which we did implement, the number one consideration there, of course, was safety and response time. But secondly, how that money was allocated to each department upon their request to get the ISO rating lowered. That was the objective. You know, again, safety being the priority, and then the lower rating, which benefits the taxpayer. And those that have done that, those numbers have dropped, and the people have benefited, and that was an objective there. So I think this board's done a good job there. This is continuously changing and evolving, so we're learning as we go. If you're ready,
It's taken me a while to get in.
Okay.
So
Well, look, and
I'll come back
talking-
to you on that one.
Huh?
I'll
Okay.
come back to you.
I just, and again, the other thing with the salary, I mean, raising that, I do believe we got to be competitive. I think our volunteer fire departments, you know, it's getting, just like everywhere else, all the other departments that are running into trouble of getting applicants and getting candidates to work in these departments. So I do think raising the hourly rate is the right way to go, and I'll say that as well.
I'm in agreement with that. I don't have a problem with that at all. And these are volunteers. On top of that, first consideration, they're volunteers. And I do think we need to stay in line with surrounding counties, and I'm fine with that too. Any data on what those calls are? Do they categorize that the number of calls per day, per month, per year? What a,
So we do.
yeah.
Do I have that off the
Excuse the
top?
pun, but are they responding to a stranded cat in a tree, or you know what?
Do I have that data off the top of my head? I don't. What I can
Yeah.
tell you is probably 80% of those calls are medical calls, is what I can tell you. Just looking at national average, about 80% of those calls are going to be medical calls.
And how many calls are those that they go to a particular residence, I'll say, and by the time they get there, someone refuses service or something changes, and they just turn around and go back to the station?
I don't want to speculate, sir, but
Mhm.
I could get you that data. I don't want to speculate.
It's
numbers,
important, so it's
but I certainly can get you that data.
just what responses are there, and how, if they're medically related or if it's something else. So,
Again, just in the
Just
fire
wondering.
service in general, typically what we see is about 80% of our responses are medical. I mean,
yeah,
it's just
so
what we
what are
see in
the
general.
other 20%?
Right. Fires, investigations, that type of stuff.
And they don't make a discretionary response there. They
No, sir.
respond.
They respond, yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
and it's important. Okay, thank you.
I did want to just address something that Commissioner Sims said. In talking to the president of the Chiefs Association, who sat on this committee, basically what the chiefs did agree to, along with this proposal, was that they would not come back next fiscal year and ask for an increase. That they said that if this proposal went through as was, that they were not going to come back to the board next year and ask for an additional increase. They did agree to that in their committee as well.
And in this budget is a 2% increase anyway, isn't it?
2% for operations,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Which is two different categories,
Right.
but enhances their ability to operate, respond, lower
Yes.
ISO,
Mhm.
on and on. So, but a point of consideration. So that's this year. They would not have that next year. The 2%.
The 2%, right, it's
Right.
every 2 years.
Mhm.
So it's for fiscal year '24, and then would be scheduled again for
The
'26.
city takes their turn next year.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Thank you, sir.
So that, the balance sheet is reporting, current fund balance reserve in Fund 250, the Fire Tax District Fund, for $1,137,789.
So then we got 1 million plus, and then we would add the 465 to that as well.
Or we would add whatever was,
Well, roughly.
estimated to be left
Right,
remaining.
right.
That would go back into that would be added to that fund balance amounts.
Okay. Thank you.
So we aren't proposing to make any changes to the recommended budget within this particular fund, but would like for the board to consider that proposal from the fire chiefs, and if you're in agreement with what they have proposed, which aligns with option B and the other criteria that were laid out on or summarized on that first slide, as far as increasing the rate, maintaining the current reporting process, and giving the fire chief some flexibility within the amount that's assigned to their department to schedule according to their needs. If the board is supportive of that, then we can accept that proposal as our guidelines for the upcoming fiscal year.
I'm happy with it.
Okay.
I'm happy with the proposal. My question is, and with our fund balance that we talked about, is if the fire departments or our fire chief or fire marshal, or even Thomas, were to come to us and say, we need $500,000 out of this account, does that go through the county commissioners to approve?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Good deal.
Bottom line, the request for 60,000 to Timberlake, that would come out of which line item there? Amy?
It will all be within the paid personnel line item.
Which
And it will
is
just
that-
be managed according to option B, the way it's outlined there per department.
So we just have one line item for
Right.
that, for all departments, so we'll just be expensed there.
And the fire marshal tracks that throughout the year.
Well, again, safety is a priority, I think, for this board and county, and that's what they're there for. And we don't know their jobs. They're the volunteers, they're the ones responding, and I don't have a problem with the dollar amount per hour. I think that's not only justifiable, but certainly within the realm of funds that we already have, and we can do that. So I'm fine with that. And the other factor is the Chiefs Association, their committee signed off on this individually. And that's the kind of cooperation I think we need to see from within that association. And so I'm good with that.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Any other comments? All right, number 5.
Yes, so Amy and Tracy have been
Oh.
typing away, so now we're at the point of looking at any adjustments that we may consider to the recommended budget.
So with and let me just go through the list of things that, oh, okay, good. I'm glad. I wasn't sure we were gonna get it up there. So it looks like we're at a net, I guess you could say deficit to the budget of $184,960. We were able to show that we were gonna use some DSS bridge funding for the Medicaid, to carry forward. That's done as an appropriated fund balance in their fund for $246,060. The 5 positions down there, I know I'm skipping around on the expenditures for DSS. If we effectively budget for them to start October the 1st, we're able to get that number down to $284,216. So you can see there's a little bit of a gap in funding between the bridge funding and 9 months of those 5 positions. We're adding back in, going to the top, Animal Services Program Director for, Coordinator, for almost $60,000. The grant writer, I'm not sure what to put in here. I know we're talking about a range between $45,000 and $60,000. So we put in $60,000, but I think after it goes through some study by the HR department, it's possible we can pull that back. But for now, I'm just putting that in there as a placeholder. And then for the jail van, we've got $82,522. The 2 sheriff chargers at $48,923 each. And then we're able to reduce the estimate for the ambulance by the new price, which gives us a reduction from what we currently have budgeted of $152,945. So effectively, we have a gap here of $184,960 that, once you all finish making decisions, we can talk about where we might want to find that. And it may be we just need to add that to the current fund balance appropriation, or we may find other cuts if there's a continuance of this work session.
So any changes there we were to propose, you can cut and re-add and rearrange this schedule here without it being in concrete, so to speak?
So right now, we're just with the decisions that you all have made so far. We're still looking at, we've got more expenditures than we do with identified carry forward with from DSS of
Okay.
$184,960. So, you know, if the decisions are completed and you all were ready to move forward, then we would have to, you know, probably add that $184,960 to the current fund balance appropriation that we have in the recommended budget.
Amy, we also had that property
Oh.
liability quote that came
Yes,
in.
you
Our
are
liability
right.
insurance quote
Yes,
came
I
in
forgot
higher
about
than
that.
anticipated. So we
Yeah.
were also wanting to propose that as an adjustment.
Right, so that came in much higher for the property liability insurance when we got the recent bill last week. And we're gonna need to add 38,000 to that contingency line. So I've got to add that in. Tracy's gonna add that in for us. And
And-
that's gonna push our gap up to 222,960.
But that's pretty much a mandate.
Well, it is, we just didn't have the bill,
Mhm.
and we estimated, but we came in under what the actual cost, for insurance for property and liability is going to be, so
Mhm.
we felt like this would be appropriate to go ahead and add that as an adjustment.
Okay. Okay, the red number just changed
It did.
Yes.
a little bit.
So it goes up a bit
And,
to add
and
that.
all of this is justifiable. I understand that. I get it. We don't have anyone here representing the sheriff's department, but the jail van is an 82.5 number. I don't know how frequently that vehicle would be used, how it would be used, this sort of thing. If we're going to reduce anything there, going back to the discussions with the manager, the DSS positions being unknown, that we were dealing with originally, just throwing numbers out there, reduce that by 2, from the 284 down. Again, the others are, I think, justifiable and needed going forward, and that leaves the 2 Chargers in there at 49 each. And taking care of the ambulance need, I think we've had a justifiable presentation on that, so just throwing out thoughts. Again, going back to the van, I don't know anything about that in their business, but the priority there is boots on the ground daily, and change that around. Cars on the road, dependable cars on the road, would be to me a priority. And here again, I don't know how frequently, how many miles that would be used per year. I don't know anything about that. Just again looking at numbers. Or if you leave everything as is, Amy, where would that 223 come from?
Right now, the only proposal I would have would be to add that to your fund balance appropriation.
And which is how much now?
That's a good question. So the current recommendation for fund balance appropriated is $3,159,375.
Mhm.
And so that would add, you would need to add 222,960 to that, which is 60, 3,382,335,
3 million.
382,335.
Okay. Discussions here. I don't know if you want to proceed with including everything there or reduce that number and juggle those numbers into this fund balance category Amy's talking about.
I'm not sure about what again, I can only guess what the jail van is used for, but I would think transporting inmates are probably from here to Durham or Durham and back and forth, if they have to go to court there or something, and or carry them to another facility. I would think that's where it would be used. But again, I think we were looking at the mileage. What was it, Charlie, on that thing, on the van?
One was 414,000 miles.
They have
The
I
it,
think that's the one they
van-
used to the courthouse.
Yeah, the van that they have proposed to replace is a 2008 Ford Econoline van that has 104,190 miles on it.
Okay.
what model year?
2008.
8. Okay, so and during that span, that's a low mileage per year.
You say 108?
So,
It's a 2008 with 104,190 miles on it.
Okay, right, that's one I got here, okay. That's the lowest mileage one.
and that
The
goes,
highest mileage is 457, 411.
it goes back to something we talked about a little bit previously. What we do here today, that might be a priority going into the next year with vehicles and the succession plan, because that vehicle would not be used on a daily basis. It's not a response vehicle. It's used for transport. I'm sorry. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir, Ray.
Didn't mean to interrupt, but just on behalf of the sheriff's department, what they had told me, one of the main thrust of going to this van is right now, they transport prisoners in a regular van.
Mhm.
They handcuff them, maybe shackle them. But this new van, it's got that $25,000 box in the back of it, so they actually put them in a cage in the box, which relieves a lot of the, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Relieves a lot of responsibility to the driver and, you know,
Stress.
the safety issues more than anything else. So it's more driven by safety, I think, than the ineffectivity of the current van.
Mhm. Similar to what I've seen at the airport when they bring in the federal prisoners.
Right.
And I have seen them exit or enter that particular van and go through the process you just described. It's not just a get in, buckle your seatbelt and drive these prisoners. I understand that. So, okay. Better explanation that that probably we needed more of today, but appreciate you bringing that out. So,
Let me clarify something real
Okay.
quick. So I already have included there some fund balance appropriation in the DSS fund that is representing the carry forward of those Medicaid funds that we're supposed to get before June 30th. So really, your total fund balance appropriation would be $3,628,395. That's $3,628,395. Because we're having to, that DSS bridge funding is effectively a reappropriation of fund balance. So it adds to your fund balance appropriation. But just know that 246,000 of that is really revenue that we're carrying forward. But we have to reappropriate it as fund balance because it's recognized as revenue in this year.
so the top line looks better.
So you are balanced unless you add, more expenditures or you reduce expenditures at this point.
Okay. Does that satisfy?
I like a zero balance.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So creative bookkeeping. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, what's go forward? We
Don't touch it.
Again, what we say here today, I know we don't have Commissioner Puryear here to get his comments or thoughts on this, so I guess whatever we decide here, at some point, he's gonna need to have some input in this, I would think. Is that correct? I mean, are we just gonna go ahead and roll?
Well, so what would happen is these changes would get incorporated into the budget ordinance, which will then be on your agenda for approval on June 19th. So we didn't necessarily anticipate any further discussion around it if the board reached consensus today as far as what you wanted to do. Now, I think that Commissioner Puryear has had some discussions with us as far as what his interest is in the budget. I don't have anything else to add from that perspective, but y'all might.
Well, a couple of things here. A consensus today would delete the necessity of the scheduled potential meeting, what, next week?
We
12?
did have a tentative budget work session scheduled for the morning of June 19th if it's needed.
Okay, so we
and-
could eliminate that.
Yes.
And then it would become part of our decision on June.
June 19th is the
19th,
next
20.
regularly scheduled
Okay,
meeting. And
19th.
that's when you would approve the budget ordinance. It would be written based on this. So
Okay.
we can certainly have discussions with Commissioner Puryear between now and then as far as what has been changed. So if he does have any concerns. he
Well, I
can
can't
voice
speak
those.
for him, and we won't speak for him, but we'll say that we've done this with the help of finance and a common sense approach here without a tax increase. And saying that, I think Commissioner Puryear would likely go along with it. Pretty much, I'm okay with it going forward and not require that pending meeting. But if something changes, it's on the calendar and we could do that. But again, I think we've done a lot within this budget to go forward, especially with schools and things that are considered there. Their request was reduced. What was the percentage there with schools? I don't know, was it 10? They wanted
We
12
did.
and we did 10.
We built 10%
Mhm,
into the budget. They had requested a 15.6% increase, and the recommended budget includes a 10%
And I think this
increase.
board's done a good job in supporting education. And my conversations with the superintendent is that they're okay with this, that allocation through your recommendation. So I'm fine there. Any other comments? Just sort of a sideline, one of the things that I'm concerned about in the budget and going forward would be allocations for mental health. That's a growing concern. It includes EMS, it includes sheriff, it includes DSS, every way we turn. But without any specific request, I guess we go with it as it is. But that's a concern and we need to think about that going forward. And I know you've got the opioid settlement funding out there, and it's beginning to flow. And I think you've got a committee organized. And so from that committee may or may not be some requests this year. I think initially, what do we have? $390,000 roughly?
Because we're going to
something.
receive it over an 18-year period. I'm
Well,
not
yeah,
sure
but
exactly what
the
we've
initial
received already.
3-year
Right.
allocation was significant.
Mhm.
So I hope we'll be able to make wise use of that money.
Right.
And to me, wise use of that money is saving lives.
Mhm.
And the second part of that is saving lives of children. And I hope that committee will address that. So, here again, budget-wise, that's a concern of mine, because that's a growing concern, not only within our county, but nationwide. And we need to consider that going forward, and we may or may not have a request during the coming year. of which we would deal with when we get to that point. Okay, we're at 0.
We are
We
currently at
okay?
0.
If the consensus is that we go with that?
I'm good with it.
Yes, good.
Okay. So then, our next official meeting would be,
June 19th
June
for your
19th.
regular board meeting here in this room, 9 a.m. Thank you all for your participation and work throughout this process and the attention that you've given to the budget and in providing feedback and in having conversations that have informed your decisions today. And I appreciate all the department heads too for their active participation in the process and all the insights that they've had into the needs and how we can better serve our citizens.
well, I would compliment everyone involved to ditto what you've just said. It's not easy. It's very difficult because we would think that it's a ground up a request in this sense because we depend on our department heads to make a logical request, justifiable request, and moving up, and then you and your staff to come up with something here that's doable, again, without a tax increase, and I think we're making progress in critical areas, and look forward to the next year based on sound budget. Now, if we're gonna meet the 19th, do we recess this one again, or we adjourn this one today? We'll start anew on the 19th?
Yes.
Okay, just for the minutes, make sure. All right, no other discussion?
I would like to make one more comment, please, sir. Chairman Powell. I want to go back to John. He talked about how many hours you put in, looking at the pay study and how to go about and where to cut, where to add, what your requests were. I spent many hours myself looking at these numbers. I spent 4.5 hours one night. I had basically tears running out of my eyes. I just said, stop, just stop. I had to wait 2 or 3 days to go back to it again so my mind would clear up, to try to ingest this again. And I still never figured it all out until I got the formula yesterday. But I understand where you're coming from.
We appreciate what y'all do.
It was tough. It was tough.
I just want to say that I think we all know that as we do our budgets each year, revenue coming in is very important, and hopefully we will see an increase each year here in our county. We have a lot of houses that are being built now, and hopefully that we will see some industry business move into our county as well. And so I certainly, we count on our Economic Development Commission to help us with that and to pursue that. And we, as commissioners, are also have to work on that as well as what we can do to increase revenue and to as far as economic development goes, is to look at getting in some industries here, getting some more revenue in this county. So that's I think our goal as we go forward the coming year is again to pursue that, look for revenue sources, and so that we can do more with our budget the next year. So.
Yeah, well, glad you said that. And that reminds me of the long day that a group of us spent yesterday, that we took an out-of-town trip, and it was based on economic development. And again, we started at 7, and we got back about 9 o'clock. And that's the type thing that doesn't show. I mean, this is through our EDC, Chamber of Commerce, all involved to do what Commissioner Sims just said. We're searching, we're looking. These departments are working and responding daily, almost to requests for information related to potential economic growth and locations in the county, and we do that on a daily basis, and that's what they do, and they're doing it. And we'll continue to do that, because that's our future. And economic growth is again where it's at. Also, I didn't mention previously, but this recommended budget was put out to the public for comment. We've had work sessions, we've had comments during commissioner meetings. We had copies for the public to see, view, and investigate in this office, in the public library, and posted online, so that the public was certainly welcome and could have gone to and investigated line by line if that's what they wanted. So again, as transparent as we think we could get it and make it. So it's been out there for quite a while. We've had some feedback on three or four departments, but overall, no other public comment has come in, pro or con to that. So again, I compliment the staff for making it transparent and getting it before the eyes of the public if they so desire. Any other comments? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Have a motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carried. Adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Good job.